Hello and welcome to Property Matters. I'm Stephen Galpin, and joining me today is David Galman, property consultant and previously a director of Galliard Homes, one of London's biggest private developers. Welcome to you, David.
Nice to be here, Stephen.
Good to have you back as always. And David, what I want to talk about today is perhaps looking into the future. We're at the halfway stage of the year. It's not been quite the year of green shoots we hoped for. In fact, it's been a bit disappointing, but I wonder what your thoughts are for the next 6 months.
So if we look back for a short period, the last couple of 3 months have been incredibly tough. I don't think anyone can say any different. Am I optimistic for the next 6 months? Not massively so. I think we're just going to trundle along in exactly the same way that we are. My biggest fears, planning is making it incredibly difficult, despite the fact that we have promises of them ripping up the rule book and going again with something new. It's not happening quick enough, that's for sure. And how long it's taking to get developments off the ground or even started.
Just on that point, the latest stats are out and they're saying that actually planning applications are 8% down. It's not increasing.
So what's that going to do to the market? It's going to create a bigger shortage, and a shortage creates a supply and demand issue. And is that going to push prices up to yet more unaffordable levels? I mean, we could do with it not doing that, but it may well be a consequence in time.
I mean, I suppose, the question of house prices is always very difficult, because if you own a house, if you own an apartment, historically, owning something has been enough to make you money. And I do accept that in some ways it's the working man's only tool to make capital for himself.
Yes. Yeah.
I do understand that. But I do wonder whether you've got this government now who is looking at every form of tax revenue that they can imagine, whether the days of perhaps even owning your own property and having any profit you make on it being tax-free, I wonder if they're over.
Well, they could well be, and I think I mean, we've all spoken about generation rent and that youngsters are having to rent for that much longer. Maybe they're quite relaxed about renting now. Maybe they're not worried about that, and they're going to look to other ways to supplement their wealth and their income in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I used to walk around. I've been here at Canary Wharf for quite a long time. I walk around and see young people, and they say to me, "Oh, is it the right time to buy? Should I buy? Should I do this? Should I do that?" I don't get those questions anymore. So I think you're right. I think the emphasis has gone away from the UK of the necessity to own your own home. Now, maybe that's been forced by the high deposits and the effects of 2008 to 2010, maybe. But I certainly think the mindset is changing. And whilst you've got a government or governments who are trying to spread work around the country, necessitating travel and commuting, rental in some ways is actually better. At least you're fluid. You move with your job, you go up there, your job changes, or you want something different, and you just say, okay, I'll finish with that property, thank you, goodbye. Sometimes it's not always that easy to sell your home, is it?
Well, no, I think you're right, and that's it, the fact that the population, the working population, the youngsters are so transient, and they're going to work abroad. They're upping sticks and going to, heaven forbid, Dubai and various other places to work, and so they don't feel the necessity to own. They don't, it's a very different mindset nowadays to perhaps our time.
Yes,
I put us in the same bracket there. Did
well,
you notice
that's
that?
very sweet of you, but I bought my first house, I think, when I was in my late teens, and I mean, it was a few £100 deposit, and did very well out of it. And that set me on a path of ownership for the rest of my life, I suppose. But that just isn't the case these days. And there's not the product to satisfy that demand anyway, is there really?
No, very much there isn't. I mean, there's very little being built in London, in central London, which has always perhaps been priced out of the market for local people or for the domestic market. and you don't see lots and lots of housing estates springing up. But that's what we kind of need. We do need some housing estates springing up outside of London and in the various conurbations to assist that.
But they've not always worked. I mean, there was a huge fuss when the train line to Peterborough got electrified. Now, it was going to turn Peterborough into a sort of London dormitory, wasn't it? But it never did. You know, we had Milton Keynes, which I suppose nowadays is just considered normal and just part of suburbia, if you like. But it took a long time to really catch on, didn't it?
Well, how long did it take for this area to catch on? You and I were here at the very, very beginning when there was, you know, 3 men and a dog and 2 Chinese restaurants. There was nothing here. And it took a long, long time. And that was with huge government subsidies, huge government tax breaks. So yeah, all these areas take time. And I think we're a very impatient society now. We want everything done tomorrow, because you can get everything done tomorrow. You can get whatever you order today will be on your driveway tomorrow, thrown over the fence by the Amazon man. And I think that's the society that we've become, that we're just too impatient.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, but I mean, talking about how long we've been down here. I mean, going back, my first job down here was with Sir Terence Conran doing Butler's Wharf, which I know you got involved with in later years. And I can remember at that time, there was very little there. We were trying to sell £500,000, £750,000 apartments, where you got a sort of situation, the taxi drivers would say, well, you know, I'll take you as far as the Tower of London, but I ain't going over that bridge, mate, because I might not get back. You know, I mean, it was that sort of thing. And, you know, you used to go to work, if it was after dark and you'd finished, you'd think twice about how you were going to get home, you know.
And even that fabulous area, when it is a fabulous area,
it is now,
it's on the Tower of London. I mean, it's beautiful, but it took a long time to get off the ground.
20 years, I think.
Yeah. Probably right.
I mean, I can remember at the time people were telling me that, you know, sort of Commercial Road was going to be the hottest place in London. Well, I'm still waiting, and I'm not sure I'd still like to get out of my car after dark there. You know, I mean, it does take ages.
It takes a long time. Regeneration is.
And this is where I think a number of people have gone wrong. People who've been what I would call station hopping. In other words, your property investments follow the line of new lines, new stations, that sort of thing. That hasn't worked out over the last few years. I mean, I don't see any explosion in the areas that the Elizabeth line services now in particular.
No, not at all.
No.
But I think that's probably a symptom of the fact that the market has stagnated. That's what we've got. We haven't got a falling market. We haven't got a rising market. It's just purely stagnated over the last number of years. And unfortunately, I don't see it. I don't see it improving.
So what do we need to do to improve it?
I think we do need a proper, sensible approach to planning changes. I think I'm getting a little bit fed up with slogans all the time coming out about absolutely everything. That seems to be the way of governing these days, is to produce a slogan and everyone's going to believe it. We need proper planning reforms. I would, and we spoke about it for many, many years when I was involved at Galliard. We spoke about the planning system needs to be privatised to an extent, not the final decision. Local people still have to have a say in that, without a doubt, but you need professional bodies dealing with actual planning permissions that are going to deal with it and deal with it quickly, rather than what we have at the moment is planning officers working for the local authority who disappear on holiday, someone else takes it over, no one picks up the file. It is incredibly difficult and incredibly slow and costly.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things about our planning system which is good. The fact that, I mean, I always say to people, don't ever treat the planning department as your enemy. Go and actually see what they want, see how you can fit in with it, and see how you can grow your idea with them. And the councils are quite good by providing sort of day shift advisors to that sort of thing. Yes. You can get specific advice, but I do question whether a team of 12 unqualified councillors, albeit that they're democratically elected, have actually got the wherewithal to make the right decisions, given the technicalities that we get involved with today, the green issues that we get involved in, what's sensible, what isn't. The business of procurement of materials today is quite difficult. It's all right saying, well, we're going to build 1.5 million homes. But I don't know whether we've got the materials to do that. I don't know whether we've got the labour to do that. And
We
all
have
these things
neither.
have got to be taken into account, haven't they?
Yeah, we have neither. We have neither the materials or the labour. Your point about materials is quite interesting, is because the local authority can specify what that building has to look like, what kind of materials you can use. And they don't go and do the research as to whether that's available, whether it's available now or in 6 months, or whether you can get it, or whether it's too costly. They don't look at the cost of it either.
No. David, just run through me, if you would be kind enough, as a developer. What's the time schedule? So we start off, you decide, you bought your plot of land, you've got a good idea that you'd be able to develop a big building on it or whatever else. So you go to your architects. How long is the architect going to take? How long's then the application going to take? And then how long is it, and what are your hurdles to actually putting your spade in the ground?
So let's assume you're talking about a building that is above 11 metres and therefore requires Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 on the Building Safety Act. Wind back from that, you buy your land, you engage with a set of architects, and you engage with environmentalists alongside that, so that you're covering two things off at the same time, and you prepare your planning application, and you work with the local authority on planning that application. You'll go and do what's called a pre-app meeting, whereby they'll kind of tell you what they're going to accept to an extent. So you're going to then get your planning application in probably within 9 to 12 months of owning that piece of land. 9 to 12 months of holding it and the costs of holding it. And let's say you're fortunate enough to have that heard and a positive result within, I don't know, if it's a substantial size development, you're going to be another 12 months, I should imagine. The 13 weeks is a complete anomaly of nonsense. It just never ever happens.
Well, there's so much technical stuff to look at, isn't there? I mean,
yeah. So you get your planning, so you're 2 years. But then the difference today is that before you can put a spade in the ground, you need to have your entire design finished and signed off by the building safety department, or whatever it's called, which could take another 9 to 12 months. So it could be three years from owning that piece of land before you stick a spade in the ground. Then you've got to get development finance to go and build it. And we've always had this conversation, what comes first, sales or development finance?
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it has changed today, but when I first started off, you'd sort of go to your bank, and your bank would say, well, I want to see you getting 20% of sales, bought off plan. So you'd go out to Singapore or Hong Kong or KL, and you'd get your 20%, and you'd come back here and you'd say, well, the bank, I've got 20%, and then the bank would say, well, I don't know really, they're foreign nationals, so we can't enforce those contracts. It'd be very difficult. So can't you get an institution to invest? So you go out again, and you try and flog another 2 or 3 floors to an institution, which you do, and then because they're buying 2 or 3 floors, they want a 20-30% discount. So you go back to the bank and say, well, I've got this now, these are UK institutions, and the bank say, yeah, but the price isn't very good, is it? You've not got what you told me you were going to get. So you go round in circles. And then I know up until 2008, probably 2015, a lot of the big banks were saying, well, you're talking £500 million now for a skyscraper building. It's too much for us. It's too much on a single balance sheet. So you're going to have to syndicate it. So you then go off and you try and get 3 or 4 banks to come in, which, if you're trying to run the thing, is just a no-no.
It just makes it very difficult, because you're dealing with 3, 4, 5 banks, a club bank, and you're having those. So you have to have a monthly meeting with them, or a fortnightly call. They'll want to see progress on sales. Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult time out there at the moment.
Well, one I always used to get is they'd say, well, you've sold that very quickly, so what would happen if we held on to it for another 6 months or so? You think, do you not realise what we're about to do to sell this? They don't get it at all. But that's credit committees for you, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, coming back to your planning, that's a sort of 3-year job then. So that will take, for a building of some size, that's probably a 5 to 6 year project.
Probably 6 years. Yeah. And that's a long time. So then the market will go all sorts of ways during that period of time.
Yeah.
And at the moment, as we know, there are, pre-sales are not happening because no one's going to take that risk anymore, which is why a number of developers have turned their hand to build to rent and PRS, whereby they are selling the entire development to an institution. The profit margin is squeezed enormously. So there's a number of house builders and developers that are literally become builders for the institutions. That's kind of what they are now.
Yes. Well, that's not really doing very much for the housing market in total, is it?
It's not doing anything for home ownership at all. And I think it will actually push rents up because these institutions, they'll run a tighter ship. They'll own a whole building and they'll be able to command a premium rent for them, or they're not be able to. They are now.
Yeah. Well, you pay what they ask or you go away.
Exactly, because there's someone else queuing up to rent it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's quite interesting. I mean, I do think that for young people in particular, the difference between renting and buying financially is not that great, is it? The difference?
Not at the moment, no. It's definitely not. And I think so. I think they will find other ways to earn those large sums of money. Whereas we will be handing down an inheritance to somebody of some sort. They won't be, because they won't have that property necessary to
and they won't have seen the capital gains over their working lifetime. It is a shame, and I do wonder sometimes whether the government understand the practicalities of how it all works, because they seem to demonize a certain portion of the market, like they've done with the smaller landlord. They don't want the smaller landlord. I understand that it's very much easier to collect tax from an institution than it is some private landlord with one buy-to-let flat in wherever. I understand that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you don't have those landlords, which I guess Margaret Thatcher created when she brought in effectively buy-to-let with a short-old tenancies, there's going to be a huge shortage of stock.
Well, huge, and it's all going. So, if you own I don't know, half a dozen houses, not in London, can be anywhere. It could be anywhere in the Midlands or wherever you like. The problem you've got now with the Renters Reform Bill coming in that respect, and various other acts that they're trying to swing through Parliament, is that a number of those landlords, they won't be able to afford to get their properties to meet the requirements. Now, I'm not suggesting that people need to live in a substandard property, but some of the standards that they're insisting upon are just not achievable. Old properties aren't going to achieve the EPC rating, for instance, that they're going to insist on.
Which is why a lot of those landlords sold their properties.
Well, selling up, selling up and getting out.
David, another point I just wanted to get your opinion on. A friend of mine is a local councillor, let's say up in the Midlands somewhere, and we were just discussing change in planning and the government's aspiration, I think we'll call it, to build 1.5 million homes and one thing and another. And he just brought something to my attention. He said, look, what I just worry about is that we had this just after the Second World War, when it finished. There was a huge need for housing, partly because of the bombing and all sorts of reasons. But he said, what I don't want to see is this rush for housing to go backwards in terms of quality and standards, and not see us go back to the sort of prefab area, which a lot of our younger viewers won't know what a prefab is, but these were very hastily constructed kit houses, if you like, mostly sort of bungalow types.
Like a static caravan of today, if you
almost
like.
Like static caravans, as you say. And he's very worried that we'll get pushed into going back to that if we're not very careful. People just so desperate to hit target figures as opposed to hit what's really needed and what's going to have some longevity.
Well, I think one of the problems there is that to build properties of the quality that's required, and as you say, so that we don't go backwards and we go forwards and continue to improve the quality of our housing stock, is incredibly expensive. So you buy the land probably for too much money, and then you spend too much building it. There's no incentive to then be able to sell it, because you're probably not going to be able to make a profit on it. And it is a problem. Keeping up the standard and the quality is very, very expensive these days.
And do you think the government will insist on that?
I think they probably will. I don't think they want to see a race to the bottom. But the issue is, land values are going to have to come down, and individual private people that own swathes of land, and I'm not talking about farmland or greenbelt, but someone that's got a development opportunity, they're going to have to be more realistic on their prices.
But you see, there again, we're getting to the same argument that I think both you and I have had over this years and years and years of dealing with property sales, particularly in London. How many times have you seen a developer successfully do something in London and think, crikey, I'm going to go down to Bristol. The prices of land, it's only a third of the cost here, and the houses are only there. I'm going to be doing fantastic. But they forget that the sales rate in Bristol is probably a quarter of what it is in London, just through population numbers. So this spreading out around the country doesn't work, but that's what you're going to have to do if you want to find the sites to build these small towns or small villages or estates to get the volume, because you're not going to do it in London, are you? You're not going to have the market.
I think the only way you're going to do it is if the government actually steps in, and they have spoken about it, but I haven't seen any evidence yet. And they've only been in a year, as they keep telling us. I'm not sure it's going to make any difference, but that's a different it's a different argument. But you need for them to create enterprise zones. What they did here was fantastic in Canary Wharf. It took a long time, but they created these enterprise zones, and they gave people the opportunity to come in here and make the area work.
Well, let me just explain to our viewers what I should say. Here in what was loosely called Docklands at one time, which now the Canary Wharf is the centre of, and the surrounding areas from sort of Tower Bridge to, I suppose, the Silvertown Docks, really. That was the sort of area. What the government effectively did was had what they call an enterprise zone, and as long as you hit building regulations, which refer to safety and construction standards, you could pretty well build whatever you liked. I think that was the essence of it. And so you had buildings going up very quickly, very fast, and an inordinate amount of flats and homes being built very quickly and very well. The interesting thing is, now I saw a mortgage application form a few weeks ago where it says, for down here, do you expect the life of your building to be more than 25 years? Because there was no pressure to build super high because land was cheap and available, so nobody did build high because it costs more money. But of course what's happened now is that developers are coming along and saying, actually it's cheaper to knock these 50-60 flats down in this low-rise building and put up a 70-story building. So it's got its pluses, it's got its minuses. But certainly the concept of an enterprise zone created so much interest and so much entrepreneurial development. I just thought it was amazing.
And there must be many other places around the country that could work. I'm sure there must be.
Must be, yeah. And who would welcome it, as opposed to fighting off sort of applications for green belts and stuff. I mean, I think the opportunities are here if we get the right thinking, if we get the right people advising the government, and I think that is often the Achilles heel, isn't it?
So they need to get seasoned developers to come in and sit and advise them and listen to them and take them seriously, but they don't. Successive governments have never.
Now,
had
look,
the
you
right
were a
people.
substantial developer in London market, and your company still is. Do you ever get asked to advise the government?
Well, never. No. And I think we've often will write to them in a strong capacity and suggest various things and suggestions and all sorts of stuff. And we in terms of the rectification for the Building Safety Act, many years ago we proposed a developer reverse stamp duty on everything to pay for all of the remediation.
Sure.
Which would have worked, and it wouldn't have cost too much money. And the developers would have been happy to do it because it would have been like every sale you pay the government something on, and it would have worked, and it would have given them the money to be able to go and deal with these remediations.
Okay.
They didn't even respond.
Well, there we are. On that very sensible note, I'm going to say, David Galman, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today. Hello and welcome to our monthly look at the legal issues surrounding the property market, and helping us with that is Chris Barry, Business Development Director of Thomas Legal. Welcome to you, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what have you got to tell us this month?
Well, I sat here in July and I started by saying there were some green shoots in the market. Sadly, that data hasn't transitioned into a stronger market in August yet.
I had no fertiliser then.
Not yet, no. So the market has been struggling throughout the course of August, and that is because the number of clients coming to market with stock is increasing, and that stock's coming from many places, but the usual sort of, sadly, deaths and divorces, but also lots of investment properties where landlords have said, look, I just can't do this anymore. It doesn't stack up for me, and I can't afford to get the property into a place.
Is that the smaller landlord?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. People who own 1 or 2 properties are thinking this is quite a lot of hassle for me now for minimal return. Let's try and sell it. So that's one issue. The other issue is that the buyers seem to have disappeared. Now, it always gets quieter during the summer holidays, but this sort of got quieter much earlier this time. And that's a worry. But the buyers there are seem to be struggling to actually purchase a property. So especially those that are buying investment properties, what we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment is the client saying, yes, I would like to buy this for the price that's being asked. And the banker saying, in theory, I would like to lend against that property. They're sending out their valuer, and we're seeing a huge rise in valuers coming back with what's called a nil value. And what that means pretty much is that the bank is saying, if we're going to repossess, we either need to keep the property on the market for a long period of time, or we need to accept a much lower price. And that's a real concern for those that are trying to buy the properties because they can't leverage any debt against it.
Okay, so I seem to have spent the last 100 years arguing with valuers about values, and it always occurred to me that the trend probably that started, let me say 20 years ago, of the big institutions hiring what I would call cut price valuers on such low valuation fees, who were therefore so frightened to overvalue or make a mistake that they could get sued by the institutions who they're advising, that their modus operandi was simply to just undervalue.
Yeah.
Just as a practice, to undervalue. And working for developers and being involved with development, I mean, it was just a battle all the time to find a developer that would, a valuer that would like your development, that would support it, and be prepared to give valuations somewhere near the asking prices that you knew you could get. Are we going back to that?
Yeah, lots of that happening. And the excuse they're using is lack of investor demand. So they're assuming that because this person is buying this property as an investment, if they sell it again, it would need to be an investor. And they're assuming that in the very near future, that investor won't be there.
But can I just pick you up on that? If a valuer is in general governed by the sort of red book valuation practices issued by the RICS, yeah? And that red book valuation procedure says you will value for today, not the future. I can remember down here at Canary Wharf, we were getting valuers coming in and say, yeah, well, you know, I know you want this, that and the other, but, you know, in 4 years' time, there's 20,000 apartments coming on stream, so we've got to take that into account. Well, no, they shouldn't, should they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Under red book rules.
Correct. And the truth is they are valuing for the future.
Yes.
But what I hear is that these companies are starting to do more desktop, and that will mean that it's an algorithm actually deciding what the value is. So maybe we get less nil valuations in the future because it's system generated and not personal opinion, perhaps.
Well, the only danger with that, Chris, is that if you have a bad valuation, as putting on the developer's hat, if you have a bad valuation, the trouble is that bad valuation gets syndicated all around the other valuers who just plug into it on their computers, and you're stuffed effectively, aren't you?
Absolutely. So the next question remains, what does that mean for the market, and what's likely to happen over the coming months, as there'll be a lot of downward pressure on prices. So we expect those to come down slightly, and the banks don't want that to happen. So we sort of ask ourselves, well, what are the banks doing about it? And they're doing 2 things right now. So interest rates over the course of August are coming down. That's really positive for people looking to buy, but also people who are remortgaging. And the second thing that's quite a big tangible difference is they have lowered their stress testing levels. And what that means is that if somebody's buying a property right now and their mortgage payment on their 2-year fixed is £1,000, when they go off that 2-year fixed onto a standard variable rate, it might be £1,200. Well, the bank stress test that client at a much higher rate, maybe 1,300-1,400. And if you can afford that, you get your mortgage. If you can't, you need to borrow less. So what they're doing at the moment is stress testing higher earners at a lower rate and lower earners at a higher rate. They're going to reduce the amount they stress test lower earners down considerably to mean that more people can borrow more money. That should hopefully help some of the demand in the market. And the other thing that I think is really interesting over the course of the last couple of weeks, there was data in Q1 to suggest that the amount of new builds being built were up about 8%, I think. That was quite positive. But interestingly, the data has just come out to say that the number of new planning application approvals in Q1 was the lowest level since 2012.
Okay, well, on that mixed news, we'll end it. So I'm going to say, Chris Barry from Thomas Legal, thank you very much for coming in again this month. Look forward to seeing you next month with more legal updates.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Matters.